Okay, friends, let's continue to move forward. Actually, I did it again. I said we were moving on to number 19, and I had just finished Laws of the Soul webinar commentary number 19. So now we're on number 20. We've been dealing with the law of repulse. We're on page 157. We've been talking about the whole story of desire, whether low desire or high desire, and how the human being, following the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, can free himself from this imprisonment. It is a natural energy within cosmos. It's needed for the reconstitution of the cosmos, for putting the apparent differences back together, at least in consciousness. In terms of life and deep essential factuality, there is no division. But this we have to come to realize, and it is desire in these worlds of apparent division that helps us put our perceptions into a unity, or recognize that they belong in an underlying unity. So we've talked about 11 points which relate to the progress of every human being in the early days, to experience, to exist, to grasp, to demand satisfaction, to pursue experience in the beginning, and then as an integrated personality. Satiety reached, then the demand for inner happiness and bliss, inner spiritual compliances, the realization of what it takes to get there, purification and the power to choose a right, a vision of the pairs of opposites, soul and personality, and we can look at that in some ways as the dweller and the angel, and the realization of the narrow path, which is the wise path to tread between these pairs of opposites, and finally we do reach repulse, or repudiation, where in a way this chapter begins. So what DK was doing was giving us the idea of how the laws of the soul function in an unconscious manner for human beings, driving them onward to the point where they can cooperate as souls with this repudiation, this scattering, this driving forth of that which is not spiritually fit, or which obscures their consciousness. So then we come into Laws of the Soul webinar commentary number 20. Such, briefly and inadequately stated, well, you can only imagine with what Master DK knows what he would consider to be an adequate statement. Obviously he's limited by our consciousness and by the time available for the giving forth of these principles of the ageless wisdom. Such, briefly and inadequately stated, is the story of man as he searches for happiness, joy, and bliss, the three levels, personal, soul, and spirit, or monadic, or expressing it in terms of realization as he progresses from the life of the instincts, driven forward, he knows not why, to that of the intellect, where he can choose. Let's put that in. Can choose under Saturn, great third ray planet, and then from that intellectual apprehension to the stage of illumination first, seeing what is there, and final identification, being what is. Identification with reality. We can call it being what is. Well, one cannot help but be what is, but one knows that one is what is. When he is henceforth freed from the great illusion, and one suspects that one is gradually freed from the great illusion on the cosmic physical plane, that once we, well, in a way, the whole universe compared to the absolute, if you can compare anything to the absolute, is a great illusion. But the great illusion we're talking about is relative, and I think by the time the the monad is liberated onto the cosmic astral plane, anything that we can call illusion is finished. What DK says, we overcome illusion at the ninth initiation. What an amazing statement when we think that with every initiation we are overcoming illusion, but it's just very partial. So at the ninth initiation we also repudiate contact with whatever we call the cosmic physical plane, and the higher reaches of that are still the great objectives for all of us in our spiritual quest. So we are very, very far from being freed from the great illusion. Maybe the final identification with reality as far as the fourth creative hierarchy is concerned is the ninth initiation. Then probably as monads we are lifted into some other creative hierarchy. Two things determine the rapidity with which he can, upon the path of discipleship, bring the law of repulse into play. I keep on thinking about, the role of Pluto in this law of repulse. It seems to be the first ray repudiating agent, and it also is the planet which gives you the signal that enough is enough and you can no longer stand, bear, tolerate what you have been engaged in before. So one is the quality of his motive. That is going to determine, let's see here, the quality of the motive of the man. We're talking about rapidity here, right? Quality of the motive. Only the desire to serve is adequate to bring about the necessary reorientation and subjection to the new techniques of living. The desire to be perfect and to have a form of self-exaltation is not sufficient. In other words, the motive of salvation for oneself is not sufficient. The quality of his motive, only the desire to serve, is adequate to bring about the necessary reorientation and subjection. So this is all the process of reversing the wheel, learning to move upon that wheel in the counterclockwise manner in the what we call the normal order of the zodiac. And so that's one, the quality of his motive. And the other is, so that's related to the soft line rays. The other is his willingness at all costs to be obedient to the light which is in him and around him. Well, easily said, but the words at all costs are there in this sentence. So, obey the inner impulses of the soul. We're told about that. It's one of the 4 injunctions we receive in a treatise on white magic. And, inquire the way, obey the inner impulses of the soul, reject worldly wisdom, so do what is right, regardless of the going against the grain of the most wise in the worldly sense and the most quoted, and then set an example. Those are the 4. So obey the inner impulses of the soul as the light from the soul comes into the consciousness, and that's hard to do. There are so many consequences which would separate you from normal life if you followed that. And that separation may seem desirable, but it's painful along the way to those of us who are still somewhat identified with the lower 3 worlds, and which one of us is not. Service and obedience are the great methods of release. Oh yes, here we go. Serve and obey, right? He's going to tell us to serve and obey. Service and obedience makes me want to make it just a little bit bigger. Are the great methods of release and constitute the underlying causes which will bring the law of repulse into play. Well, we may have wondered, how do we bring this into play? Okay, so we serve and obey, and the law of repulse comes into play, thus aiding the aspirant to attain the longed-for liberation. Seems like rather humble processes, Nothing very glamorous, hopefully not. Service releases him from his own thought life and self-determination, because he has to meet the need of others, and in a decentralized manner, think of them first. His brother's need becomes for him of greater moment than his own. Okay. He has to think of the other. Okay, altruism, true altruism. Obedience to his own soul integrates him into the larger whole, wherein his own desires and urges are negated in the interest of the wider life of humanity and of God himself, God the planetary logos. Well, again, very good advice obviously given to us by a master, that is someone who has done this, and we are in the position of having to prove that we can do this. Service releases him from his own thought life and determination, because he is very attentive to what is missing in others and what he may help provide, and then his thought life is directed towards meeting those needs. And he does not seek to chart his own path according to his own interests, but to meet the needs of others. Obedience to his own soul, to that still, small voice which speaks with the voice of the whole, really. There's nothing the soul advises that is not related to the welfare of the wholeness. So his own desires and urges, that is, for his own personal comfort, are negated in the interest of the wider life of humanity, of the fourth kingdom of nature, and of the planetary logos itself. God is the great server. God the planetary logos, God as Sanat Kumara, is the great server. So, planetary logos and Sanat Kumara, and expresses his divine life through the love of his heart for humanity. And as we rise to those higher states, we will realize in rising the great love which has always surrounded and pervaded us. And I'm sure, it's an amazing thing. Even little flashes of the love of the Christ are amazing, and yet he looks to the Father as still a greater source, a greater Savior on this planet, a greater teacher on this planet. And thus it rises and rises, displaying intensities which we certainly as human beings could not bear. So much lies ahead, and has always lay ahead. Well, we've been through this countless times, literally countless. You can't really count infinitude, and there's been an endless, beginningless series of universes from which we have forever graduated. We, the one, have been the graduate of our own self-created scene. And we're in process yet again and yet again, forever yet again. These thoughts, again, are easily stated, but the implications are so profound as to leave one speechless, really. Yet, says the Master, when these simple truths are enunciated and we are urged to serve our brother and obey our soul, it seems to us so familiar and so uninteresting that it can evoke little response. Serve our brothers. Brother's need is for him of greater moment than his own. When the sole purpose of his life is to serve and save the world, and his brother's need is for him of greater moment than his own. We're interested in that, little arcane, occult tidbit, that missing piece of information, all of those things from the plane of mind, and here are the simple ways of actually achieving liberation. Well, I guess with maturity we begin to notice the important things and to perform the important things, leaving behind us the childish things, as St. Paul said, and taking upon ourselves those things which relate to spiritual maturity. If we were told that the following of a prescribed form of meditation, this is humorous in a way, the practice of a definite formula of breathing and regular concentration upon a specific center would release us from the wheel of life and identify us with the spiritual self and its world of being, gladly and willingly and joyously would we follow these instructions. Now, DK is giving us here a true sense of proportion, right? And he's pointing out the foolishness in which so many of us are involved, thinking that we are somehow scaling the heights through recondite and arcane approaches when we're avoiding the broad path, the path of simplicity, which would lead us straight to our goal. But when, in the terms of occult science, we are told to serve and obey, we are not interested. Well, okay, after a while, one reads a long time and then one begins to see really what is important. Read, meditate, think, and then see what is important, then do it. I've been reading these books now for over 40 years and Theosophy for 50 years, I guess. And it's only just beginning to make sense, so, well, we must persist. The great second ray is in expression these days, and it is a ray that works with no let-up and no leeway, as we are told. It's unrelenting in its pursuit of meditation and study and service, and it will win the day, and it is the ray for all of us, all of the other rays being sub-rays on that ray. But when in the terms of occult science we are told to serve and obey, we are not interested. Yet service is the mode par excellence for awakening the heart center. Yes. And obedience is equally potent in evoking the response of the two head centers to the impact of soul force, unifying them into one field of soul recognition. So, awaken, everybody. Awaken the two head centers, the main ones, and the heart center by serving and obeying. This is something we really must keep in our mind. Well, obey the inner impulses of the soul. Obey the Master's word. Obey the still small voice. Obey that which is actually indicated to us as best and not most convenient or expedient or safest. And this is a definite stage reached when one is willing, there's the willing word, connected with the head center, to go forth in obedience. So little do men understand the potency of their urges. We began this whole section with the discussion of urge, an urgency that desire provides. If the urge to satisfy desire is the basic urge of the form life of man, the urge to serve is an equally basic urge of the soul in man. When he says this is one of the most important statements in this section, then we really want to treat it that way. If the urge to satisfy desire is the basic urge of the form life of man, then the urge to serve is an equally basic urge of the soul of man, of our released consciousness on the higher mental plane and beyond. This is one of the most important statements in this section. It is as yet seldom satisfied. Indications of its presence are ever to be found, nevertheless, even in the most undesirable types of human beings. But because the good is inherent, really, the good is inherent in the human being. It is evolved in moments of high destiny or immediate urgency and of supreme difficulty. Well, when Master Moria says the worse the better, you know, it's for the power of evocation which the worst brings. The worse, the better, so that all that is spiritually, oh, let's get that, huh? Spiritually powerful within us may be evoked in the moment of crisis. So it is evolved in moments of high destiny. I'm thinking of Joan of Arc, you know. At first she shied away from her fate, and she was made to put on women's clothes, and she agreed and all the rest of it. And then in the morning she was found once again wearing the men's clothes, realigning herself with the destiny that had taken her into the English prison. And she knew it would be fatal for her, but it was a moment of high destiny, of high choice. The immediate urgency of the battlefield, the supreme difficulty of almost insuperable tasks, almost but not quite insuperable, and the expenditure of one's self in, well, making them superable, in making those tasks doable. I guess when we live under extreme stress, we say, oh, why am I doing that? But who's talking, you know? It's the personality and its feeling of discomfort that is talking, but the driving soul within is following its basic urge, and though the personality crumble, the driving soul will achieve what it must, at the expense of the less real, of that which is less real than itself. And later, when looking at it from the other side of the veil after death, one will say, oh, I'm glad I went through that. I'm glad I sacrificed the lesser for the greater. But at the moment, it seems a great sacrifice when the lesser with which we are identified is being sacrificed for the greater. It's difficult, but necessary. The heart of man is sound, but oft asleep. There are some really memorable quotations from Master D.K., and this is one of the most memorable. The heart of man is sound, but oft asleep. And so the good is within, though it is hard to bring to the surface, and even in the criminal, well, we've all been criminals, and we've all been, as they say, unconscious black magicians, or at least gray magicians until the 4th degree. So which one of us is not that still? We wouldn't be reading these books, I suppose, if we were 4th degree initiates. Maybe some of the things that Master D.K. wrote we would be reading. I think in some places, I mean, we're told the masters read the books 3 and 4 of the Patanjali Sutras. So I think there are sections in Cosmic Fire, and I suppose in the Rays and Initiations, which would suffice to bring new light, even to the high initiate, even to the master. Serve and obey. These are the watchwords of the disciple's life. They have been distorted into terms of fanatical propaganda, and have thus produced the formula of philosophy and of religious theology. The formula as well, in other words, the compulsion to obey. You know, the whole idea that changing your faith should be punishable by death is outrageous. But that is the way insecure people have been over many, many centuries. It's not limited necessarily to any one religion. So fanaticism, which is really impatience, I think so. Rather than having to take in the whole world and understanding all that's around you, you think you have the path to glory or the path to release, and so fearful are you that you force yourself and all others upon that path, so you don't have to consider the wider picture and the possible delay in achieving release from your fear of life. Well, that's, a little interpretation, probably telling a lot about me, but We have to look within ourselves, be attentive to our own thoughts, and find the universal within our own state of consciousness. But these formulas of philosophy and religious theology, which should not be pushed too far, DK says these formulas do at the same time veil a truth. They've just been exaggerated. You know, sixth ray, the ray of undue emphasis, I think it's called in some place. They have been presented to the consideration of man in terms of personality devotions, and obedience to masters and leaders, instead of service of and obedience to the soul in all. So it's a natural misinterpretation based upon the limitations of our state of consciousness. When we outgrow identification with the lower self, we will not think that personality devotions are so important, and devotions to the personality of others. If you look at certain nations, the dear and blessed leader is put up before the people. The cult of personality is found, and everywhere the image of the leader is found, and this is a totalitarian way of limiting the consciousness of the devotee, who might otherwise be able to turn within and find the identity in all. But instead it should be the service of and obedience to the soul in all. The truth is, however, steadily emerging and must inevitably triumph. We have to say, really, what patience it must take to be a master of the wisdom. Once the aspirant upon the probationary path has a vision of this possibility, vision of this, of a greater, wider, spiritual life, no matter how slight it may be, then the law of desire which has governed him for ages will slowly and surely give place to the law of repulse, because he really desires something higher. He repels a lower desire in favor of a higher desire aspiration. He repels lower desire in favor of higher desire and aspiration. The law of repulse, which will in time free him, is the first ray law, and the law of freedom, well, it's a Syrian law really, but it has to do, I think, with the Uranian type of impulse within our spheres. And that's the major first ray planet. It will free him from the thraldom of the not self. So this is the importance of this law. Let's just say the importance of the law of repulse is that it brings freedom from the not self. It will lead him to those discriminations. That's at the fourth degree too. Discrimination is keenly important. Two planets of discrimination, which are Saturn and Mercury, will work to discriminate the cosmic ethers from the dense physical body of the Solar Logos, and will give the determination to live within the cosmic ethers, which means the fourth degree, really. It will lead him to those discriminations and that dispassionate attitude, let's just say, no passionate desire for the not self, which is the hallmark of the man who is on his way to liberation, the hallmark of the man. So he will really be able to tell the difference between truth and illusion, between reality and unreality, the unreal, lead us from the unreal to the real, and the astral body will be quieted, and desire will no longer animate him in some kind of outreach towards the unreal, and therefore he is on his way to the release from suffering, which is inevitable in the phenomenal universe, the dense physical layers. Of course, universe, it might be our universe. How much of those dense physical layers exist in other solar systems, we don't know. I think you'd have to have planets to have dense physical layers. I'm not sure you have that with respect to the sun. The hallmark of the man on his way to liberation. Let us remember, however, that a discrimination which is based upon a determination to be free, it's kind of a first-rate method and kind of heartless method, and a dispassion which is the indication of a hard heart, and let's just say which refuses to suffer and suffer with, will land the aspirant in a prison of a crystallized shell. It's somewhat the attitude of the first and fifth rays combined. The so-called Prussian rays are the first, fifth, and third. And I'm remembering that he talks about certain psychopathologies which can work out with the rays, and with the first and fifth ray types, they have such an attitude of separativeness which renders them eventually untouchable in the ramparts of their own isolated state of existence. They have created such a shell of rejection around them. They can never be reached. So they will land the aspirant in the prison of a crystallized shell, which is far harder to break than the normal prison of life of the average selfish man. So DK speaks from experience, having seen those who have done this. And you can see, well, that's what the members of the Black Lodge have done, have they not, using this first and fifth ray. Members of the Black Lodge, well, anyway, Black Lodge have done this, made themselves untouchable and unapproachable. And, it's somehow the fear of contact and the fear of surrender, fear of unity, really, and of the loss of the illusory self, which has been cultivated over millions of years. They were, after all, initiates of the previous solar system. So there are all kinds of dangers on the path, and the Master warns us of what these may be. Right now it may be, simply theory for us, but it is something we will encounter as we go along. There has to be service and obedience. There has to be a discriminative and dispassionate attitude for the right reasons. And let's see, all of these have to have the right motive. These have to have the right motive. If the motive is selfish, the result is worse than conventional selfishness. So when you just want something for the separated self, so this is a determination to be free for oneself. This is a real wanting for the separated personal self. You kind of wonder, it does seem that those who are members of the counter force are very much individuals, very much persons. In a way, they are very much still connected with the dense elemental life, and their identity is invested in what they are on that level, and not as unified and unifying souls. That's something they're deadly afraid of, I do believe, because it seems to them to be the relinquishment of everything they've thought they've been. And the dispassion, which is an indication of a hard heart, like, feeling nothing, I feel nothing, no matter what may happen to you or anyone else. It reminds me of that story about Aleister Crowley, where he was on a mountaineering expedition. I guess he was very good at that sort of thing. And Someone in his party was in a great deal of trouble, life-threatening situation, and he was not moved in the slightest, nor did he lift a finger to assist. He just went on about his business, whatever he was doing, and did not come to the aid of that particular person in distress. Felt nothing. Dispassion? Okay, in land the aspirant in a prison of a crystallized shell, which is far harder to break than the normal prison of the life of the average selfish man, which time will take care of. This selfish spiritual desire is often the major sin of so-called esotericists, not really, because they haven't really touched the heart, which is the esoteric point. It's the major sin of so-called esotericists and must be carefully avoided. Selfish spiritual desire, desire for my own ascent, my own liberation. Ramakrishna saying all of egoism is consisting in the words me and mine. Therefore he who is wise, it's so good, he who is wise will apply himself to serve and obey. DK is a master teacher. He brings the point home in the simplest way. We do want wisdom. We want wisdom for ourselves and for others. We want to be among the serving and saving forces on this planet and in this solar system and on and on. And that requires wisdom. Obey the inner impulses of the soul. Serve your brother. Obey the inner impulses of the soul. Listen to the still small voice. And somehow force yourself forward no matter what. It's the progress onward, driving forward through space. The path of initiation is ruled by the first and seventh ray, and those are the rays needed to have the technique, the magical technique, to free oneself from matter, from identification with matter, even though one serves within it. Excuse me. Okay, then, we have reached the next section in the Law of Repulse, the Law of Repulse upon the path of discipleship and initiation. What was the first one? Far up here, I'm sure. And is it worth trying to find it? Oh, surely there must be the possibility, law of repulse and the function and the quality of desire. That's it. That was the first one, the law of repulse and the function and quality of desire. Very interesting, as we human beings are trapped in that quality and subject to that function. And now we will move forward to the law of repulse as it expresses upon the path of discipleship and initiation. So let's see what is said here. Imagine speed reading at that rate of things going by. Well, I think there are ways to assimilate information equally as rapidly. It won't be involving words per se. When the discriminating sense, that Saturn-Mercury sense, the spiritual correspondence of the sense of smell, the last of the five senses to emerge in humanity, and yet, connected with the fourth subplane of the mental plane, and thus not with smell per se, but with taste. But anyway, let's just say when we seek to discriminate, it's interesting, the French, as they say, have the nose. They can smell. Even the nose is enlarged in many French people. And they are the third ray, fifth ray civilization, fifth ray soul, third ray personality. The sense of discrimination, very, very strong. Saturn and Mercury there, very strong. So when the last of the five senses to emerge, it's connected with emotional idealism. It's connected, I suppose, with spiritual discernment as the top of the 5. From another point of view, it might be connected with the telepathy. It's hard to know what to do with those 3 cities that are found on the higher 3 levels of the mental plane, because on the mental plane, all 7 planes are considered fair game for man, and all of them have useful cities. But we're not given the higher senses. I suppose the common sense would be number 6 in a way, and the esoteric sense number 7. We're not giving the higher correspondences there on the Buddhic and Atmic plane, and certainly we're given nothing on the monadic plane at all, although we cannot imagine that it is devoid of cities. In fact, they're just not listed because they can't really be relevant to us at our present stage of evolution. They would be meaningless to us, I suspect. So when this last of the 5 senses is developed in the aspirant, and he knows the pairs of opposites, and just for practical consideration, let's call this soul and personality, and has gained a vision of that which is neither of them, and that would have to be, in a way, being itself, being or essence itself. Then he can pass on to the path of discipleship and enter the true path of discipleship, not what we sometimes imagine as discipleship. He knows the pairs of opposites. He has a vision of substance, of essence, of being, at least a vision of it. He is not identified as it until he is an initiate. But he's gained a vision of that which is neither of them, and then he can pass on to the path of discipleship and enter upon the arduous task of cooperating with the spiritual laws, particularly the law of repulse. It is a disciplic discipleship. No, disciplic. It is a disciplic law, and pertains as well to the initiations. So on the path of initiation, this law would still be of use and may be found in the destruction of the causal body, I suspect. Well, part of that second ray thing about being weary with everything and disinterested and not interested in anything, and nothing really arouses one's outgoing and desire. He says, it's a problem in the integration process of the second ray type. That's all part of the law of repulse as well. At first, unconsciously. At first, it says here he hardly recognizes. What does he hardly recognize? He hardly recognizes the influence of this law. But a growing distaste, you might say, growing distaste for all things familiar. Distaste for all things familiar. As he tells us in the second ray integration formula, the usual circumstances of life and engagement with them prove to be dissatisfying. I think we've all been through that if we've reoriented ourselves. So we're really interested in these things that hardly anyone is interested in because they're considered fanciful and unreal. We have had that kind of reorientation. We've gone through satiety, enough of that distaste, and searching around for the next possible target for reoriented desire. We've been through that. It is as difficult for him to grasp its implications and to measure its possible effects as it would be for the average working man with a mediocre education and a total ignorance of esotericism to grasp the significance of such an occult truth as that expressed in the words, oh yeah, just try to introduce occultism this way, right? The construction of the antiskarana between higher and lower manas by the divine Agnishvata, the solar angel, functioning through the egoic lotus, is the task to be carried forward. during the contemplative stage of meditation. Well, you know, this is, maybe he's trying to tell us that we don't have much of an education here either. This does bring in some new ideas, actually, because, you know, who is it that is constructing the Antikarana? Is it the soul-infused mentality, and thus, in a way, an extension of the solar angel? I don't think the solar angel, per se, on its own plane, constructs the Antikarana. It has to be something where the individual from the mental plane is involved in the fact of projection and so forth. So there's still much here that we could learn. It's interesting that, but you know, Alice Bailey in her autobiography talks about some of an early lecture in Theosophy that she listened to, introducing the ageless wisdom, and she said it was just the worst way of introducing the subject, because it dealt always with technicalities and jargon, and people could not, they had no handle, they had no way to enter, no latch to hold, no grip. So, you know, how we present to people who may be interested in a higher and better life, we have to use bridging forms of language. Obviously, there's nothing bridging in this example here. It is a technical piece of writing, very good for maybe people like ourselves, and even challenging for people like ourselves. So the law of repulse is difficult to grasp its implications. It is remote and distant from the understanding of the average disciple. So, and measuring up to its effects it's difficult, because it's going against the grain, you know. We live on a second-rate planet. We're not yet a sacred planet. We haven't taken the second initiation on this planet. At least the planetary logos has not taken the second cosmic initiation. The desire body is still very strong. Desire is very strong. And hence we are attached as humanity. It's difficult to apply this Ray 1 law. As I said, even the first ray is somewhat warded off, somewhat rebuffed, repelled by the solar logos in his desire to work more along the second ray lines. So he has to choose what energies he will allow. So we can be forgiven being part of these two logoi for whom the second ray energy is so important, if we are not adept at assimilating and applying the first ray. So we have to get a sense of proportion here about what's difficult. And you can only imagine, just memorize this sentence and try it on one of your friends and see, you know, what kind of look you get when you do that. And then think back to DK's statement of how difficult it is to grasp, really, the meaning of the law of repulse. But he says it's simple. Well, I don't know. I find some things in it a little bit challenging. This statement is relatively simple to grasp intellectually by the average occult student, but is utterly meaningless to the man of the world. Unfamiliar words, unfamiliar concepts. The law of repulse is equally difficult of understanding by the disciple as he enters upon the path. Well, you know, is this the path of discipleship? Is this nearing, maybe as he nears the path of initiation, it becomes easier. He has to learn to recognize its influence, and then he must himself learn to do three things. It's not something that he as a personality wants, you understand. As a personality, he does not want this, but something within himself is awakening, and in his individual consciousness, he is becoming more aware of it, and this something wills the repulse to occur. And he's torn between that which he familiarly thinks himself to be and that which he is beginning to know himself to be. This is the wretchedness, the being torn in two directions process that we all pass through. So he must learn to do three things. But remember, let us continue to associate. Let us continue to associate, serve, and obey with the law of repulse. 1. Through service, he has to do this to steadily decentralize himself and thus begin occultly to repulse his personality. Because why is this? He finds his more real center outside his personality. He must see to it that his motive is love for all beings and not desire for his own release. This must be a hard one at first, because having caught the glimpse of the possibility of release, people want to go there. Just as DK says, well, when you become integrated personality, nothing can prevent the integrated man from running across the bridge. It seems to be the first response to go to that place that promises greater release. But then, he must revolve upon the pedestal of light and turn the other way. He who stands within the light is blinded by its radiance. And he longs to go that way, but he hears the voice of those upon the darkened way and revolves upon the pedestal of light and helps them. So until, the absence center, the solar plexus center allied together would charge forward, the heart center is what keeps us attached to those. Heart center keeps us attached to those who are less fortunate and yet more bound circumstances. Okay, so he has several things to do here if he's going to understand the law of repulse. So let's look at it this way. To understand the law of repulse, a man must do the following. And the first is decentralize himself. And I think we should say here to remember that service decentralizes. Then, through an understanding of the pairs of opposites, he begins esoterically to isolate the noble middle path of which the Buddha spoke. Being still identified as the personality, he cannot suddenly be entirely a soul. This would take him to the fourth degree, and he's not there yet. So he has to, well, in a way you could say, render unto Caesar the elemental life, that which is Caesar's, the third aspect, and render unto Christ that which belongs to the Christ. Isolate the noble middle path. In a way, this is the Shushumna. In a way, eventually, it's the path of being, ultimately. But from a practical perspective, it simply means giving the personality its due without overindulging it, and yet still pressing forward into the life and consciousness of the soul. It means those things. Number 3, what else? Through the comprehension of the words of the Christ, enjoining men to let their light shine, not to hide their light under a bushel, let the light shine forth into a dark place. He begins to construct the path of light, which leads to the center of life and guides him out of darkness into light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality. So first, the path is to the soul. And this is the first part of the Antikarana, but then the path is to the spiritual triad, and the monad, the second, and let's say most first-ray aspect of the Antikarana. Really, the Antikarana is the triangle as we've seen in the diagram. Yes, it's a triangle, and in the earlier Right here we see it. 1, 2, 3. And this is the part of the Antakarana that I'm showing right now. That is the one for which instruction is given. But the very first part maybe corresponds to the third aspect, this to the second aspect, and this to the first aspect, with first ray projection involved. Eventually, when the egoic lotus is destroyed, then there's only one part, isn't there? And it's the line connecting the monad with everything below. So this is the true path of the Antaskarana, the path of the just, perhaps. This is the true path of the Antaskarana, path of the just, the noble middle path, the path of Libra, which the disciple weaves from out of himself, speaking symbolically, just as the spider spins his thread. So the abstract mind is involved in this weaving, and it's our own higher thoughts and received intuitions and impulses of will. All these things are coming from the triad, come down that first thread of light, which we manage to project as we reach out in the reach out from the soul-infused lower mind. It's all right here, of course, and these many technicalities are to be envisioned, but the reality is something different than we might think. It's simply a question of being sensitive to that which always surrounds us and pervades us. And sometimes we need the scaffolding of these concepts to find the method to enter that which is ever present. So we weave this bridge through our intention, through our visualization, because that helps to really create the bridge of light through the active projection along certain magical words of power, and then response will come, and the bridge will function in two directions, invocation from our point of view and evocation from the point of view of the triad. The triad and the monad are evoked, and the father rushes forth to greet the approaching son. The prodigal son is coming home. And this is all through the rising along the Antakarana. That is homecoming along the constructed bridge of light. Let your light shine means build the Antakarana from this point of view. So let your light shine. It can mean many things, but in an occult sense means to build the Antakarana. It also obviously means, illumine the mind and let emotional loveliness take the place of the usual astral attitudes, and let the etheric body shine with life and be electric and magnetic. All of these are aspects of light, any vibration in a way. Vibration can take the form of light, but light and sound and color in a way are all equivalent. They are all a vibration. It just depends on how they are perceived. Service and understanding of the way and the building of the true line of escape. Not escape for selfish purposes, but escape to be recharged, Escape to be recharged and to bring back into the world the treasures which are found above. Maybe the angel and the flaming sword, with the flaming sword and the dragon, are similar. They're guarding a treasure, and you have to pass them by a certain vibrational achievement in order to enter the treasure house, and then you have to be able to bring the treasure down. Maybe there's something about Jack and the Beanstalk here, where a great beanstalk grows up into heaven, where lives the giant, great and powerful forces, and one goes down the beanstalk carrying the treasure from the giant. Is the giant happy? Were the gods happy when Prometheus stole fire? Is there a revenge of the gods upon those who bring down the treasures from heaven? Well, that's built into the mythology of many civilizations and cultures, so maybe there is. This is the task, then, to be carried forward upon the path of discipleship, service, and understanding of the way, and the way being the Antikarana, building, the way, the path, the paths of discipleship and of initiation, and the building of the true line of escape into the higher worlds, where the higher dimensions can be touched and the higher energies accessed, and they can be brought into connection with the lower worlds. This is what we need to regenerate the lower worlds. That is the task to be carried forward upon the path of discipleship. Such is the object set before all the students of the esoteric sciences at this time. We're studying the arts and sciences. Art is the ability to do well what science reveals. Maybe I'll just say that. Art is the ability to do well and intuitively that which science reveals as factual. So such is the object set before all the students of the esoteric sciences at this time, provided they desire it enough. Notice the intensification of desire is needed. This is aspiration. Desiring something high enough, something high and sufficiently so, is aspiration, and can train themselves to work selflessly for their fellow men. So keen desire, aspiration, and selfless service. And then this task will be achieved. We will serve, we will understand the way that leads to the three divine aspects, and will bring greater illumination to humanity, and will set them upon the proper path of the reversed wheel, and we'll be able to help reverse that wheel, or help them reverse it for themselves, and then the building of the true line of escape from the worlds in which our consciousness have been enthralled, captivated. You know, we use things in a reverse manner. You say, oh, you look enthralling, you look enthralling. Well, oh, you look so glamorous, as if this is a great compliment. But what it means is that the lower energies, the beauty of the lower energies are so strong that they lure you in, and you find yourself imprisoned by ancient magnetisms. So I guess we don't have a magazine yet called Enthrall, do we? We do have one called Glamour. I don't think we have one called Illusion, do we? It wouldn't be very attractive. Somehow Glamour is interestingly still attractive to a great many people, provided they desire it enough and can train themselves to work selflessly for their fellow men. And you see this in Mother Teresa, you see this in Father Damien, you saw it in Albert Schweitzer, you see it in the Dalai Lama, you see some of the selfless workers. You also see those who hold high office and rob their countries of billions of dollars, or whatever their currency may be. You see those who enrich themselves at the expense of others. That's hardly selfless. It's all about fear, really. As they succeed in doing this and approximate ever more closely to that which is not the pairs of opposites, and thus achieve the central way, which is the eventually the way of pure being, or of the essence. It's not division, it's not attraction. Division can belong to the divine separator on the third ray, attraction to the second ray, but the way between is the way of homogeneity, the way of recognized essence, the way of recognized substance. steadily the law of repulse begins to swing into operation. Because really, the law of repulse is of the spirit. Is of the spirit, which is being, essence, substance, reality, oneness, all these words. It's neither the attraction of things for each other or the separation of things from each other, but it is that of which all things are composed. So this object before all of us, reviewing this is our task, to serve, to understand the way, and while in the world, to be in the world yet not of the world, and to build the true line of escape. This is our task, and we can do it if we have sufficient aspiration, keen enough, if we work selflessly for our fellow men, or we cannot do, or we cannot accomplish these three things: effective service, showing the way, and escaping into the higher worlds, and coming back with the great treasures for the amelioration of conditions below. It's related to the three great demands, I think, in Rule 2 and 3, is it, of the 14 rules. As they succeed in doing this and approximate ever more closely to that which is not the pairs of opposites, neither cohesion nor separation, and thus achieve the central way, steadily the law of repulse begins to swing into operation, and we tend to look to the right and the left, and say, with the ancient Brahmins, neti, or Vedantists, neti, neti. Not this, not that. Not to the right, not to the left, but the central way which leads to reality. To reality. And when the third initiation is taken, this law will begin to hold the dominant place. So even though it's active on the path of discipleship before this, it becomes very active. Active at first on the path of discipleship, and then increasingly active on the path of initiation, leading to the fourth initiation, at which point we repulse and burn the entire causal body. So it begins to hold the dominant place in life, and they may feel, these people may feel warm in heart and so forth, but their intentions are remote from the intentions of the average man, and are aimed at polarization within the worlds where being means something. Who is to know what is the inner life of the Dalai Lama? We see his active expression and service. Towards what is he really striving? It's a life of great sacrifice and service. You can see that. You can see that when he said, was asked, what would you like? And he said, well, more meditation, to meditate, because you know that this for him is the way of deeper penetration, and yet his life calls him outward all the time. I suppose, the sign Cancer calls towards the masses, and Libra, which is his rising sign, I believe, calls towards Shambhala. Okay. The word repulse has an unfortunate connotation in many minds, not seen the value. It's like the second of the great invocations, let the lords of liberation issue forth, that light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. People are not so eager to embrace the word death. The word repulse has an unfortunate connotation in many minds, and this Revulsion against the word indicates man's innately spiritual bias. And by spiritual, we mean unitive, cohesive. In this context, means unitive, cohesive, even loving. Repulsion, the desire to repudiate and repulsive attitudes, words, and deeds evoke in our minds all that is unpleasant to contemplate. Pleasantness has to do with unity. Let's see. Pleasantness has to do with unity and harmony. And of course, repulsion is going to drive apart all those things which would otherwise be joined in union, be joined in harmony. Yet spiritually considered, I suppose from the point of view of the spiritual triad and scientifically viewed from the true knowledge of occultism, the word repulse indicates simply an attitude towards that which is not desirable. So if we can take away the connotation and all the emotions associated, sort of the Camel-Manassic conditioning to the word repulse, we will see that it indicates an attitude towards which that which is not desirable. And what is not desirable depends upon the point in the ladder of evolution on which the individual stands. So that which is not desirable is changing all the time. This, in its turn, as we seek to determine that which is desirable, calls into activity the virtues of discrimination, mentality, right, dispassion, emotionality, discipline, physicality in the disciple's life. So let's, let's give them their proper allocation. So this is in the mind, dispassion in relation to the astral vehicle, and discipline, although, these words, the word discipline can stretch across the whole gamut, but in relation to the etheric physical body. So we repulse what is undesirable because we are satiated by it. It has, we have seen what it can give, and what it can give is less than that which is awakening within us and giving us visions of higher possibilities. Then we try to turn toward that which is desirable. It will be in the interior life. And the mental discrimination, emotional dispassion, physical disciplines, and also decentralization. So right there you see how these 4 Ds are related to, in relation to the personality. Discrimination in relation to the mind, dispassion in relation to the astral vehicle, discipline for the physical vehicle, and decentralization for the personality, finding a different center altogether than the personal center that one had held. And oftentimes the other 3, these discrimination, dispassion, and discipline, assist with this 4th task of decentralization. I wonder how many Ds we could begin to pile up here. It seems to be, well, in general, the whole process, it's obvious, isn't it? And it's a word that's commonly used to encourage certain keynotes to be developed. The summation word is detachment. And it was one of those key words for Alice Bailey herself. It is always a key word somehow for a second-rate type, second-rate soul type. So the summation word is detachment. These words indicate the urge to devaluate the unreal and undesirable. There's another D word, right? It's really good, because value has to do with what you desire. So remove desire from the unreal and the undesirable, to discipline the lower nature till the choices are readily and easily made, and, well, all aspects of the lower nature, but the physical vehicle very much so, at least in the beginning, which leads to the discarding of that which imprisons or impedes the soul. A lot of D's here. So we finally reject, we finally throw away, and everything, this is a Plutonic act, to discard. To discard is a plutonic act. Eject, reject, cast out of one's system, discard. We cannot carry with us the poison of the ages. We have to throw it back out for regeneration. And that will increase the power of our system as a regeneration of negative energies, a regenerator of negative energies, and we'll be able to deal with all that has been rejected, excuse me, in a redemptive manner. So the major concepts are the definitely and carefully chosen way or procedure, the way of detachment, which will free the soul. There's that Uranian first ray impulse from the world of forms, namely the dense physical vehicle of the solar logos, eventually, at the fourth degree, and identify it, first of all, with itself. The consciousness identified IDFD, identified with a dimension in which consciousness knows itself as it is all the time and is not deluded by objectivities. So, it will free the soul. The major concepts are the definitely and carefully chosen. Well, there you go. I mean, that's Saturn and Libra. Way or procedure, which will free the soul from the world of forms and identify it, first of all, not ultimately, but first of all, with itself. Consciousness identified as consciousness, then consciousness identified with the deeper source, being. Then consciousness identified, IDFD, as being. That comes later, coming later. Thus freeing it from the world of illusion, and then with the world of souls, which is the consciousness of the Oversoul. So one knows oneself as the Oversoul. Emerson wrote about that, and this is the soul of the great life in whom we live and move and have our being, and of many lives greater than we are along the way. It's not an immediate leap into flawless identification with the consciousness of the planetary logos. It's a slow process, and ever greater spheres of consciousness are entered, and these are, in a sense, the consciousness of greater composite beings. They are entered, and eventually we enter into the consciousness of the planetary logos itself. But of course, that's not the end, that's just the beginning. So freedom through the law of repulse, and through discrimination, dispassion, discipline, and decentralization and detachment. These 5 Ds I have memorized, although sometimes putting them in the wrong place. But detachment is the overall process, and one even has to detach from the causal body, in which one can focus when one decentralizes from the personality, but one has continually to decentralize along the way and find that one is not that which is the causal body at all, but one is the life itself, one is the pure being within various spheres. And then one continues to detach from those spheres and finds eventually, I suppose, that the sphere of the universe is the last containment. But that's, well, although it's been done endless times, it's still a process for us in time and space at this time and in this space. Endless recurrence. I think I was told, I read, that Nietzsche drove himself quite mad with the idea of eternal recurrence. But his view of it was that in every universe the recurrence would be exact, and so there would be an exact repetition. And I think What was being missed there was the principle of unrepeatability. After all, you never run out of possibilities in the infinite possibility, the great absolute. It is infinite in possibility. So there's no need for any moment in time-space to repeat any other with exactitude. The law of unrepeatability, we might call it. So endless recurrence in terms of cyclically appearing universes forever, yes, but in terms of the sameness of any slightest moment, no. No sameness. Sameness existing only in essence, and difference, or at least to consciousness, existing in the configuration of the various parts of any universe. Little fugue into philosophy there. There is no need to enlarge here upon the technique whereby this choice is made. So here we have carefully chosen. I think I want to emphasize those words. A carefully chosen way to tread. We're always choosing where we put our next step, whether it goes straight forward or rises or descends or deviates in some way, or whether it goes backwards. We do have the cube of space here, forward, backward, left, right, up, down. The next step is our choice. There's no need to enlarge upon the technique whereby this choice is made. We might say in time, TAS, time and space. Oh, that's a good one, wouldn't you think? TAS, time and space, a nice abbreviation. Right. So in time and space, there are 6 possible choices. Up, down, left, right, forward, backward. And our way is forward and up, I would say, and not backward and down. And if we know the way between the pairs of opposites, it will be neither to the left nor to the right. The way of discrimination, the method of dispassion, and the discipline of the life have been made plain and clear by the teachings of the past 2,000 years. So we do realize the Tibetan is giving us something quite new, and through the many books written to emphasize the teaching of the Christ and of the Buddha. So these are the things which are clear to us now, clear to us, not new, but still essential. Through a right understanding of these, right choice can be made. At every moment, if we don't allow ourselves simply to be guided by our instincts, and even that in a way is a choice to a self-conscious individual, right choice can be made, and that which should not be cherished or desired can be repulsed. So we see, I think this is very important, how much the factor of choice is involved in the law of repulse. Many in earnest students, such as those who will read this treatise, has found it of advantage to write down for himself his own personal understanding of the 4 words: discrimination, dispassion, discipline, decentralization. We know the levels to which they are assigned, and finally detachment. So, rather than offer, well, I've been kind of offering my own view of these things, but let each of us pause and define these words for ourselves. And, your definition is the right definition for you. It's not like going on a search for what the best minds have said about these things, or what Master DK is just pause at this moment. Discrimination between what and what? Dispassion in relation to what? Discipline over what? Decentralization from what? And define, according to your best concentrated thought, what they mean for you and the manner in which you may be applying them, if you are applying them. 1 page given to each definition should suffice if it embodies truly one's highest thought. Well, this is no simple sentence we see. I think I'd like to pull this in for the members of the Moria Federation, University of Seven Rays. This would be an important thing to do. Simple things can build the bridge to higher consciousness and more empowered being, empowered action and identification with being. 1 page. Maybe DK encouraged the students he had under training in his groups to do these things. Perhaps it was so. Students will realize that as they practice these 4 virtues they are called strengths, strength, the prime characteristic of a disciple, they are thereby automatically calling into play the law of repulse. So, no mystery here. The practice of these 4 is a type of practice of the law of repulse, which upon the path of initiation brings revelation and realization of a very high state for the 5th plane of the Atmic plane, counting downward. Revelation, a more general term, I think. The expression of this law upon the path of initiation is too advanced for those who are not yet versed in the basic discriminations and who are still far from being dispassionate. But it's intriguing, isn't it? What one is repulsing upon the path of initiation and who is the one repulsing. It strikes me that states of lesser, though spiritual, identification are repulsed in favor of states of greater spiritual identification. This is just a generalization, but it strikes me, there's the good and the still better and the still better and so forth. So lesser states of unity are repulsed for greater states of unity, and there are higher and higher samadhis, as we are told. Have you seen that picture of, it's an old one, of course, because Ramakrishna died in the 19th century, but it's a picture of Ramakrishna. He's being held up, his physical body is being held up by his disciples. He's in a state of samadhi. He looks very happy, very blissful, we might say. So these are the great teachers, and they are in this state. They've worked their way into these states. Even Socrates, he has to have been an initiate, entered what was called his rapts. Maybe not samadhi, but Socrates entered. They're called rapts. And we have to say very close, you know the word, to raptures, where one is lifted up into a higher state altogether. Not the, grossly materialized version of the rapture in the fundamentalist Christian sense, where you're driving your car and suddenly no one's driving the car because you've been raptured up into heaven and so forth. A lot of car accidents that way. Is there need, therefore, to enlarge upon this law as it works out in the life of the initiate? He says, I think not, but of course, maybe in his next presentation he may bring something of it. The disciple seeks to achieve without passion, pain, or suffering the distinction which lies between. So in other words, divorced from common astral reaction, seeks to achieve the distinction. So really staying in the illumined, discriminating mind, right and wrong. These are large categories. Good and evil, large categories. Light and dark, spiritually understood, and it can be, well, darkness in a way is a more blinding light from a certain point of view. Prison and liberty, it's a bit of a Saturn-Pluto versus Uranus, the lower expressions of Saturn-Pluto, and even Neptune for addiction. Love and hate, introversion and extraversion. We will do well to ponder on these dualities. The rays express through the ray, well, let's call it this way. The ray expression can be much modified depending on whether introversion or extraversion is obtaining. Extraversion. How does he say it should be spelled? Oh, there's the R missing. Extraversion. Truth and falsehood. Looks like, of course, he's putting, well, he's not always putting the good thing first, is he? Quite a bit he's putting the good thing first. Introversion and extroversion, you cannot say one's better than the other. Right, good, light, but prison is the bad thing. Love, truth, mystical and occult knowledge. Occult knowledge would have to be the higher in this case. So mystical knowledge based on a profound sense of duality and the merging of the poles, and occult knowledge based on identification, the self, and the not self, soul and body. These are 10 factors. The disciple seeks to achieve, without passion, pain, or suffering, the distinction which lies between these 10. And right there, there are discriminations between them and choices about which way shall be trodden. Every one of these has a kind of a valuation, except for introversion and extraversion. Because we cannot say, sometimes he talks about a morbid introversion and a very healthy, expressive, serviceable extroversion. We cannot say with mystical and occult knowledge that one is bad, but there's a progress there, a progression from mystical to occult knowledge, while retaining the mystical knowledge, achieving occult knowledge while retaining the mystical knowledge. So there's not a valuation there, but simply a progression. And the self and the not self, well, it's all the self, isn't it, really? There is no such thing as the not self except temporarily, from a temporary perspective in time and space. It's all the self. But given the encapsulation of any particular self which does not embrace the whole, there always has to be a not self, seem to be a not self. When one is the whole, and pervades the whole with complete knowledge of the whole, and is the all-seeing I, there is no not self. It's all oneself in emanation, soul and body. So important discriminations and choices in relation to these 10, right? Whoop, that's not what I want. So important discriminations in relation to these 10, and important choices in relation to these 10. Which way should we go? The choice directs action. choice directs action. We cannot have the law of repulse without choice. We're always faced, we are always faced with two possibilities when the law of repulse is in action. And we choose the one that is more cohesive, integrative, holistic. That's what we choose, that which leads towards higher life, and we repudiate temporarily, though reclaim later, that which would prevent the higher realization and the higher identification. I guess moment to moment we're making a choice. Moment to moment we have to be super aware of these choices, which can seem so mundane, but there will be consequences with every choice, and these consequences will lead us towards greater unification or not, towards greater cleavage and division. Excuse me. Many other dualities can thus be listed. So these are dualities, and let's just say that most of these dualities have a vertical dimension to them. Higher life and lower life. Introversion, extroversion do not necessarily. There is a higher and a lower with mystical and occult knowledge. Some consider it parallel between, let's say, Neptunian knowledge and Uranian knowledge, saying that both are necessary, and certainly the Christ had both. So in some way we can equate them as being soft line, hard line, and not say that one is higher than the other, but from a certain progressive point of view, occult knowledge is higher than mystical, truth certainly higher than falsehood, the self certainly higher than the not self, although, you know, it's kind of interesting, the little self can look out at the great life as the not self. So that is a little bit quizzical. Soul higher than body, love higher than hate, good higher than evil, right higher than wrong. Light and dark, well, is dark higher than light, or light higher than dark? It depends on how we understand that. Dark, spiritually understood, which becomes a very intense form of light and faces then later towards a still greater light, which appears dark at first. So there's not an entire parallelism here in these dualities, but he's talking about the dualities which can thus be listed. Having then discovered the fact of these pairs of opposites, the task of the disciple is to discover that which is neither of them. Neither, maybe neither and both, in a way, because the spirit is both. It's that which divides, it's that which coheres, it is soul and body. There is nothing that is not the essence, or, the essence, or of the essence. So, in a way, you might say something beyond good and evil. I have not actually read that book by Nietzsche, but I know from the metaphysical point of view, we're not looking at a position that one can take where good and evil are meaningless to one. One can say, well, I'm beyond the necessity to be good, you might say. I don't think we're talking about that. We think we're talking about such a state of identification as essence that we realize that both good and evil are derivative of the essence, that arise from it, emerge from it. Evil is only temporary, but then is good temporary? Is good a relative term? So these are great philosophical questions, but ultimately there has to be a way of living where the good prevails, because the latter stage of any divinely inspired design is what we call the good, because it comes together in cohesion and according to plan, and the evil state exists when there is resistance to the formulation of that archetypal pattern which is intended. So these are maybe temporal terms, good and evil. But can we say that the absolute is good any more than we can say that it is evil? We can't really say that it's any of those things. Is it the most desirable? Well, it is what is. One cannot help but be it. You know, the limitations of the human mind are severe, and even to begin to become aware of the limitations of the human mind, at least, hopefully, is a step in the direction of overcoming those limitations. So it is this central intermediate way that is revealed to the initiate through the working of the law of repulse. Neti, 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 neti. Central intermediate way. May be difficult to understand. I wonder if I understood this when I first read it more than 40 years ago. Working through the law of repulse, which occultly enables him to push with either hand to a distance afar from his way that which intrudes and veils the central way of light, which I would say which leads to re-identification as being. Well, because, you know, essentially and deeply and at our very root, we are always identified as being, but the projection of ourselves, which is limited by self-design to a state of ignorance, has forgotten identification as a state of being, so there is only what I would call re-identification as that state, and a realization that one has always been identified as that state. But words are one thing and realization is another. So we work ever to thin the veil between the lesser self we think we are and the self we actually are. And you could substitute the other words, the lesser being we think we are to the being we really are, and so forth. Pushes with either hand to a distance afar from his way, so it does not attract him. It's like treading the Sushumna, really, that which intrudes, which obscures the realization of reality. It intrudes, veils, obscures the realization of reality, the central way of light. For neither on the right nor on the left lies safety for the man who seeks the lighted way. Well, this, you know, one can interpret this in different ways. Sometimes the extreme right can be considered spirit and the extreme left matter, and the center is the way of the soul. But you see, that is interesting because, you know, extreme right, spirit, or being, extreme left, soul, extreme left, matter. The soul way is the middle way, the way of consciousness uniting the two. That is one way to look at it, but sometimes the Sushumna, the central channel, is exactly the way of being, and neither in the way of cohesion nor the way of separation, right and left, is the truth found. Does this sentence really mean aught to most of us? Well, maybe not, but I've tried to offer two interpretations which sees, well, the central way, I guess, is never the way of matter, unless we call it the way of substance, but no, I don't think so. It's never the way of matter. It's either the way of soul, and that in the earlier days, when spirit has not yet been achieved, but once soul has been achieved, it's almost as if there is a changing of positions, and the central way becomes the way of being, the way of will, the way of the first aspect. And actually all three, really, have to be united by that which is neither of those three ways, but which is life itself, which is be-ness itself, which is essence, substance itself. So neither the way of intelligence, of love, or of will, none of those is the ultimate way. There is no way, really, because there's no separation, so you don't need a way. A way is a path between two things which are separated, but they're not. So there is this synthetic realization in life, which grows, I suppose, and reveals the illusion for what it is. Neither on the right nor on the left lies safety for the man who seeks the lighted way. Well, that, when I think about that, that's particularly, neither in the extremes of spirit or in the depths of matter lies safety for the man who would best progress through the soul. Now, that's one way of looking at it. But I say to myself also, neither in cohesion nor in separation lies safety for the man who seeks to realize himself as essence, which is the substance out of which the right and the left derive. Let us seek to express to ourselves in words the qualifications and name of that third or central way, which is, for instance, neither light nor dark and neither love nor hate. Okay, well, that is the way of will being to me, anyway. I've been trying to do this. I've been trying to say those things which it means to me. But to say them and to live them, obviously, again, two different things. What is the name of that third or central way, which is, for instance, neither light nor dark? Let's just say it has no relativity. It has no relativity. Well, I'll just say, I don't want to say in it. It just has no relativity. Relations do not exist within it, at least not as realities. No relation is an ultimate reality. That which is ultimate is one thing. There can be no relation. We cannot with clarity see what it could be, nor will we until the increased stimulation which is released upon us upon the way of initiation does its appointed work. So we would say that, after the third degree, when the monad comes into, shall we call it view, or becomes impressive, then we will understand what this central way is. When I first looked at this, I don't know if I could understand it, but I was taught by a man who knew, who was in the state of identification. He was in the state of identification. 6 planets in Pisces, Leo rising. You couldn't have a better combination. At least a lot of planets in Pisces and Leo rising. So I knew something of this, but I wondered, could that be what DK is talking about? But then later, as I progressed in my thinking and wrote my book on infinitization, I began to realize, yes, this is exactly what we're talking about. This central way, which is the way of essence, substance, being, essence, reality, repeated essence, reality, the substratum, the fount, the fount of all existence. I think in my infinitization book, I think I have about 241 names for the nameless. Talk about futility. But exhausts the mind, and then something else comes in. So some idea of what it means may appear, however dimly, to our vision as we deal with our third division, the law of repulse and the Pilgrim on the way of life. Now this leads into the section which I did before, and which I think there's about 8 hours of programming on it. It's largely 4 programs, but the programs are about 2 apiece, and 2 hours apiece, and you can find it on the Makara website, makara.us, under commentaries on commentaries, or commentaries on the old commentaries. Anyway, before long it will be under the law of repulse, the stanzas. So let us proceed with this a little bit. We shall base our thoughts upon the words earlier quoted. The law of repulse drives in 7 directions and forces all it thus contacts back to the bosom of the 7 spiritual fathers, and you kind of wonder, will this law of repulse lead to what Stephen Pugh has called the cosmic Manu? Will this lead to the cosmic Manu, or to the 7 rishis? Because they are the spiritual fathers. So will we be, in a way, will this take us all the way back to a kind of a first-ray source? Will we be distributed to other centers in the one about whom nothing may be said from this source. It's difficult to know those paths. It's not really given to us to know them. We're given the 7 or 9 cosmic paths, the last 2 not named. And we're, Stephen Pugh, I think, was brilliant in this respect, that he identified certain constellations where these 7 paths led. Whether for all thinkers there was an agreement upon which constellations they were, some of them, I think, are very accurate. And this question, where does the ray path go? I think this was his idea, that it goes to our particular sun. And I think he had his own good reasons for thinking so, but I don't consider our solar system as the expression of a cosmic logos. I consider it simply a center within a cosmic logos. So it seemed to me that all of those paths led to a constellation which was a center called a cosmic logos within the one about whom naught may be said, and I felt that our solar system was too small for that. But anyway, his work can be studied, and who knows when confirmation will come from one who is a master of the wisdom on these things. We have come definitely to consideration of the way of repulsion governed by this law, which is the way or technique for each ray type. There are certain things that each ray type has to repulse, certain ways of living which no longer serve. I mean, if the 6th ray type builds a tunnel, it has to be broken down. If a 3rd ray type is enmeshed in his self-created glamour and can see no light because of all the many thought forms, then that web of obscurity has to be broken. If the 2nd ray type is piling up so much knowledge of the world that no intuition can get through, then the spade of the thinker has to descend into his garden of the mind and break down all of those little crannies, the crannies of worldly thought, so that the light can flood in. If the 1st ray type builds a garden just for himself, it later has to be a garden for everybody, so destruction has to come. And the 5th ray type, if he's searching within the pyramid and the darkness of the pyramid, he has to search for the secret of the form of God, the garment of God within all of creation, outside the pyramid as well. And the 7th ray type, what does he do? Coming down here. There's ray 3, and here is ray 6, and yep, that's right, it's the room. It's the room. So he's been trying to hopelessly rearrange this room in front of him into some kind of order, but only when the great magnet above him, behind him, revolves him on the pedestal of light does he see into the archetypal room. So he has to repulse his lesser arrangements for the greater divine arrangement. There are different modes of repulsion. According to our soul ray, we will find those ways of repulsion and move from a situation of lesser consciousness into one of much greater consciousness as we succeed in dispersing old conditions. For the 3rd ray, it's kind of a disentanglement, And may have left the 4th ray out. He loves the personal beauty and what happens when the chord of God sounds. And the great harmony sounds and drives the mixer of sweet sounds to silence. He's humiliated in a way, and this is a good thing. A humiliation comes, a humbling, with all of these laws of repulse, the direction of the laws of repulse. So, though the same law can be seen working in all 7 cases and in all 7 directions, yet the results will differ. Because the quality and phenomenal appearance upon which the law of the divine will makes its impact and consequent impression differ so widely. These different workers have created different circumstances and contexts and become attached in different ways to their own limitations. So the breaking up has to occur in different ways, even though the same law is operative. It's the same law. And it is a law, remember, that at the third degree really takes power. So we cannot say, oh, we're done with this law. I mean, at the fourth degree, it really expresses itself in fullness with the destruction of the causal body. But who knows whether higher expressions of it do not continue. The complexity of the problem is therefore great. These seven soul laws lie behind all the various presentations of truth as they have been given out by the world teachers down the ages. That's an important statement. This is not just the seven directions of the law of repulse. This is the seven laws themselves. Lie behind all the truth given by the great teachers. It requires much spiritual insight, however, to enable the average disciple to see the correspondence or the thread of ideas. Again, a great project which link, for instance, much spiritual insight, which link the Beatitudes and these seven laws, the stages of the Noble Eightfold Path and these soul potencies, the eight means of yoga or union of the soul, and this septonate of influences, seven soul laws, the 10 commandments of the Semitic religion, and these seven laws of the soul. Well, a Moria Federation project, or from any good esoteric school for the future new esoteric schools. How many Beatitudes are there? Let's just see here. Beatitudes. How many? Beatitudes, definition, Matthew, Beatitudes for kids, Beatitudes song, Catholic, Beatitudes meaning, Beatitudes explain. Well, let's just see the Beatitudes, pure and simple. They are a set of teachings that Jesus, blessed are they. So let's look in the Wikipedia. Maybe we'll find the most harmless definition there. Beatitude means, it means happy, fortunate, blissful, blessed. And here are 8 Beatitudes. The 8 Beatitudes, often followed by a commentary. So let's put them over here, the Beatitudes and the 7 laws. Now, there's not going to be a one-to-one matching, is there? Afraid not. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, Alice Bailey calls them the trained, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied, the true aspirant and disciple. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Here is the law of karma. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Purification is related to vision, is related to the second aspect. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And here we have particularly those who respond to the Shambhala, great Shambhala peace, or the kind of peace which humanity can more easily understand from hierarchy. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And this is the fate of every fourth degree type, to undergo some sort of persecution for in relation to the 3 lower worlds which eject the individual. So again, I kind of want to offer this as a possibility for some eager student. We've already seen how we can relate the 7 soul laws to the, well, we've seen there is a possibility of doing so, to the chakras, to the planes, to the parts of the, let's see, how did it go? Chakras, the planes. I'm leaving one thing out. Yes. So, yes, that which I left out was the 18 degrees of Masonry. So we've seen how the 7 soul laws might be related, but there were 18 actually. Let's see. Masonry. The 18 degrees in Masonry, the 18 force centers. This was in relation to the 18 subplanes, and the combination of laws, not just soul laws, but cosmic laws as well. So I was incorrect in saying just the 7. So there were 18 here, cosmic laws, systemic laws, laws of the soul, in relation to the planes, the centers, and the Masonic degrees. And then the Beatitudes seems to relate the 7. Yes. This relates the 7 to the Beatitudes and the stages of the Noble Eightfold Path. That would be very interesting. I can just see these projects emerging, and the 8 means of yoga, so there are 3 8s. And the 10 Commandments, we might have to do a little work on that. But again, tempted to get into it. This is a project which someone really could undertake. I feel as if I want to write a letter immediately to someone who could maybe undertake them. I'll do that this very moment. Well, I did that. I called a student friend of mine and said, would you like to undertake this project? It's the Aries way of doing things, kind of instantaneous. No compulsion involved, but, it needs to be done. We've come across 2 types of correlation. The Tibetan talked about how much correlating work needs to be done in esoteric astrology, and it's scattered throughout the books. The correlating work is Mercury work, and it does bring about a vision of the unified parts and their proper archetypal relationship to the whole. So, if the correspondence or the trend of ideas which link the Beatitudes, the blessedness, those having achieved the atmic level, really, that's where the Beatitudes begin, well, the stages of the Noble Eightfold Path expressed here and differently expressed in different ways: right values, right speech, right modes of living, right thinking, right aspiration, right conduct, right effort, right rapture or happiness. And there are probably other expressions of these which are, I think, even more, let's see if there's any place else, the Noble Eightfold Path, okay. And it looks like the ones that DK gives are these. Yes, they are those. Right. So these are his, I suppose, his translations, and therefore must be good. Then the 8 means to yoga. We have 3 8s so far, and we have to kind of line them up and see how we could use Mercury to bring connection with them. They are the commandments, or yama, the rules, or nijama, posture, or asana. He does give a little bit of this below. Right control of life force, or pranayama, abstraction, or pratyahara, attention, or dharana, meditation, or dhyana, and contemplation, or samadhi. I suppose right away one could see right rapture or happiness can be correlating with samadhi and looking at the Beatitudes. Well, we would have to work on it. The poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, possibly. Or the seeing of God, perhaps. And we'd have to give our reasons for these things. And then the Ten Commandments, maybe not reading the whole thing, but thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth below, or that is in the water underneath the earth. That would have to be translated, because symbols are useful, and one could write off the entire Hindu civilization, Brahmanic civilization, with a commandment like this. Thou shalt not take the name of thy Lord in vain. This has a lot to do with occult silence, I would say. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This has to do with ritual and the appropriate order of process. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land that the Lord hath given thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. So right there we go into the problem of covetousness. So that is one of the, I think, let's see, let's look here. In the light of the soul, right, covetousness. And that's one of the rules, abstention from avarice, it looks like. Harmlessness, physical nature. Oh, these are the commandments, right. These are the means, the commandments, where we are to abstain. Okay, well, you can see it'd be quite a project, can't you? Let's finish the commandments off. Maybe ideas come to you. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. So it has to do with, right speech, and it has to do with truth. And thou shalt not covet. Of course, covetousness, stealing and covetousness are in a way one and the same. So there are some overlaps there, and maybe those two could be combined, since there needs to be an 8 in the commandments to correlate with the other 8s. Well, anyway, again, the seed has been dropped, and what I would suggest is lining the these 4 sets in columns, and giving sufficient room, and maybe 8 columns with 4 columns of text and a blank column in between to discuss the relations that one sees. And then I'm sure that the Christian statement, the Buddhist statement, the Hindu statement, and the Semitic Hebrew statement, all of these will give the different insights needed. Mostly the commandments are expressed in terms of negation. The 8 means of yoga lead all the way to samadhi, and basically there are, I think, 5 rules and 5 commandments. So there are, what do we have, 8, 6 plus 10, we have really 16. We have double 8, really, if we look at each one of the commandments and then each one of the rules. So means number 1 are the commandments here. Means number 2 are the rules, which are more positive in nature. And let's see if means number 3 is coming up anytime. Right. Okay, abstention. Well, anyway, it is a project and has to be laid out. And what is the important thing about it? That different civilizations have had different approaches to the spiritual path, and perhaps we can, certainly the Beatitudes are a very high approach, because it speaks of those who are truly blessed and have attained the Atmic plane. The means also will lead eventually through the lower planes to the samadhi, the open head center, the realization really ultimately of monadic consciousness. That can even lead in a way, there are certain samadhis, I suppose, related to all the different cosmic etheric subplanes. Perhaps there's certainly a monadic samadhi, I suppose a logoic samadhi, certainly an atmic samadhi. When we're in the Buddhic state, is it a samadhi? Maybe not. But the others are related to the head center. And the chakras in the head. The Ten Commandments are pretty much about what you shouldn't do in the elemental worlds. It's not about the higher states, so in a way it's a bit lower. But the having no other gods before me, in a way, almost speaks of the absolute. And it's like saying, well, you better recognize the aspects of God, but not take the aspects for God itself. Of course, it's been severely misinterpreted and brutally misinterpreted, so that any artwork which symbolically represents states which can, high states, abstruse states, which can hardly be grasped except with some symbolic help, these symbols are destined for destruction, as if one worshipped the symbol and not that towards which the symbol pointed. Well, there are, I'm sure you know, deep connections here. These series of 8, 8, 8, and 10 have been explicated down the ages, and not only the literal interpretations, but the deeper ramifications. But just think about the Mercurian light that would pour in. I mean, you know, when I'm looking at this, again, tempted to line them all up and try to find the way, but maybe that's for you to do, or for anyone who would take it on as a project, and see the light flash forth as the Mercurian connections unite the different aspects of these systems which are to lead towards goodness or to lead towards enlightenment. I think we might have to, you know, get into some of the negatives here of the means, the commandments, in order to find the 10 commandments. I think the yama, it means death, doesn't it? Now the nijama are more positive in their expression. DK is now going to tell us something about these. He's going to do a little bit of the correlations, and we'll see whether we had thought so. Students would find it of interest to test their understanding of the esoteric relationships existing between these groups of teachings and see if they can for themselves trace the basic meaning. So DK had said, well, how much of the it's not, I don't want that. I want to go back. Yeah. He would say, excuse me, how much of the mountain of vision have you climbed for yourself, he would say. And this is an adequate example of how to undertake that climb. How much of the mountain of vision have you climbed for yourself, or are we still, he didn't say this, but are we still seeing as if on the shoulders of giants? Well, we certainly are with Master DK, seeing on the shoulder of a giant of mind, a giant of understanding. But there are certain of the lesser hills that we can climb for ourselves, and this is a real invitation to do so. I think it would take me about 3 programs to do it, and it's an exercise of detachment for me to avoid plunging into this. I don't want to take away someone else's opportunity here, or maybe it's just that I'm lazy, or maybe I just want to keep the flow of the discussion going, but I think we can already see the connections. You know, when you have dharana, which is concentration, right, attention, and meditation or dhyana, we right away see that right thinking will be involved. And what will right effort be on what plane? Certainly right rapture or happiness is climactic and is not meant to be the false rapture or happiness of the astral plane alone, divorced from reality and filled with all kinds of glamours and illusions. Yes, it's tempting to get into this mercurial work, but okay, let's pass on. Let us, by way of illustration, thank goodness he does this, trace or indicate the relation between the 7 laws and the 8 means of yoga. He's going to demonstrate how this might be done. And what we could do, we could insert other systems from other religions and philosophical systems and see whether there was a valuable correlation. But maybe he's chosen, you know, some of the most important, the Hebrew, the Christian, the Buddhist, the Hindu. He's chosen those. Probably there are systems in Taoism and in Islam and other Zoroastrianism and so forth, other systems which will have a similar reflection because they all basically came from the same shambolic source in the night of time. So DK doing what he intends to do now is doing this because it will give us an illustration of the difference existing between the means of yoga as understood by the average yogi or esotericist and those as they can be understood by the trained disciple or initiate, and basically he is asking for the esoteric interpretation. Interesting that in this, under the discussion of this 4th law, he's talking about correlations and how these different systems all lead to the same goal of freedom. Mercury distributes the 4th ray. This is the 4th law, and these correlations are here discussed. Well, the 5 commandments are the universal duty to everyone, and 2nd ray force is involved, and that will lead us directly to the law of magnetic impulse, which is unifying and is under the 2nd ray. It is the 2nd law, but also really under the 2nd ray. And the universal duty, I think, you know, we really need to repeat what those 5 commandments are. I think, you know, even though we're not going to do all the correlating right now, there's the rules, and here are the commandments. So, harmlessness, truth, abstention from theft, abstention from incontinence, and abstention from avarice. So let's put them down. Harmlessness, truth. Let's see if I can use this. Well, maybe not. Abstention from theft, incontinence, and avarice. Abstention from theft, abstention from incontinence, abstention from avarice. Well, these are, all of these, if we tell the truth, if we are, generally, these are modes of achieving harmlessness. Harmlessness is a great second ray process. Let's see, this is the paragraph, and let's call this 0 point, and let's see how this will work. Yes, that brings them closer together. Now, the rules for self-training. So it's not that all of the commandments are talking about what we must refrain from, although truth implies abstention from lie, and harmlessness implies abstention from harm. So all of these 5 really are under the general category of harmlessness. The rules for self-training, these are universal duty, irrespective of all times. The rules, internal and external purification. There they are. Okay. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's put them down just to be internal and external purification. Internal and external purification. Contentment, fiery aspiration. Fiery aspiration. And spiritual reading and devotion to Ishvara. Spiritual reading, devotion to Ishvara. We study these, in the Maury Federation, and many other groups do as well. These are the rules for self-training. This is taking oneself as a disciple. There are 5 of these. 4th ray force, which, why should it be 4th ray force? Well, perhaps because the pairs of opposites have to be considered and the relation between them. Seeing as the soul sees, from one's own personal point of view, being devoted to the higher self, purify one's psyche and one's outer form, both and. Contentment, fiery aspiration towards a higher state, 2 states involved there. And contentment within, regardless of circumstances without. 4th ray force, and we know the law of sacrifice is ruled by the 4th ray, but there's so much more explanation that could go with this. Posture, a poised attitude towards the world, one holds a certain stance. Notice the 2, 4, 6 have first been given, the soft line rays, in the earlier means of yoga, and the 6th ray force is the law of service. So right relations, I suppose, in action, and right ideals expressed to one's fellow men, and holding that particular stance, although we could sometimes see posture as related to the 7th ray. The 4th brings us pranayama, but there's rhythm there, and the 7th ray force will bring us to the law of group progress, or the law of elevation. It's a law of spiritual development, and it is the rhythmic method of growth, bringing all life process into order, and eventually attuning with the planetary rhythms, which will make one a true expression of the plan, because all the plan is related to the law of cycles and is expressed rhythmically and in order. Then we have number 5, abstraction. Well, a great detachment is connected with number 5. Pratyahara, it's a withdrawal from desire. The 5th ray, interestingly, is an aspect of the 1st ray, and 1st ray takes us to the law of repulse. So law of repulse always has us standing farther and farther back and disidentifying from that which desire would attach us to, and that makes sense, of course. Attention, it's concentration, it's correct orientation. Interestingly, that force which is involved so much in scattering energies, at first the 3rd ray force, is a master then at concentration. DK has said the 3rd ray gives the ability for sustained attention on philosophical studies. Behind the forms the weaver stands, and silently he weaves with great concentration. This leads to the third ray law, of course, the law of expansive response, which we have yet to elucidate, though not much is said about this. It takes us into the realm of abstraction, where the third ray reigns as the lowest part of the spiritual triad. So it takes us into the higher mind, and perhaps it is a law which, well, it is interestingly, yeah, I think it's connected with the law of service. Yes, it is. Whereas the law of group progress is connected with the law of magnetic impulse. So we have to remember the correlations here between the earlier laws and the later laws. Then meditation, right use of the mind, real concentration. So let's see how these are expressed. The 8 means of yoga involve abstraction, pratyahara, attention, or dharana, meditation, or dhyana. First you have to give your attention, or dharana, meditation, sustained attention, or dhyana. Interesting that it's connected with the fifth ray, but certainly there is a focalizing and a concentration. Leo, the sign of concentration, the fifth sign, fifth ray, is connected with the law of the lower four. The soul is in deep meditation. Well, I better not say too much about that right now. I said more about that earlier, but I think I need the prompts to look at that. We'll see where we go, and maybe we can come back to this. Certainly, it's interesting that the number 5 is detached in a way from the lower 4. The soul is the 5th, and the lower 4, personality, mind, astral nature, and etheric physical nature, that's one way of considering the lower 4. But they may have a connection with the cosmic ethers as well. The soul is in deep meditation. The solar angel, a product of fifth ray force and second ray force, looks down at a certain point when see how number 5s line up when the 5th petal of the egoic lotus is being somewhat mastered. That's when the meditation of the soul kicks in, and the solar angel scatters not his force, but in meditation deep communicates with his reflection. So the soul is in meditation deep when sufficient of the mind has been infused by the soul, and some of the soul forces coming into the mind. The 5 makes a very great deal of sense. What's the result of it all? The result of it all, since there are, what do we have here? 8. The result of it all is contemplation. And this is samadhi, complete spiritual detachment, and maybe it should be stated that it is samadhi, because we've been through dharana, dhyana, and samadhi is the last. It's the result of it all, dharana, dhyana. To detach, pratyahara, to give attention, proper attention, dharana, to sustain that attention, dhyana, and then to detach from the lower worlds and experience fully. Now, what force is it? It's not given a ray force. Maybe it's the summation of all complete spiritual detachment, and we'll call that samadhi. Okay. Well, that shows us how the Tibetan would go about correlating these, but of course we have to expand upon what he has said. We have to add the 10 Commandments, and we have to, as a supremely high consideration, think about the atmic meaning of the Beatitudes. If we turn here to a treatise on cosmic fire, and we go to page 188, we will see, I believe, on the atmic plane, beatitude on the 7th level, blessedness. And there are 8 forms of blessedness. Of course, the number 5 and 8 do correlate. They correlate, perhaps, yeah. The 5th creative hierarchy from below is the 8th creative hierarchy from above. Well, anyway, there are many numerical correlations here. As you see, I'm really rather going on here because I want to finish this particular section. A close study of these relationships will be found suggestive to the disciple and illuminating to the initiate. I suppose it's part of the method of achieving the initiate mind, part of the method of achieving the initiate mind. So let us not, to contemplate these, revelation will come. We are dealing with factors which are found here also in the cosmic ethers. These are not strictly relating to the personality. Maybe the Ten Commandments do, but maybe there are higher ways of understanding the Ten Commandments. We can always spiral them up. Let us not, however, confuse illumination with a new or bright idea. It is something far different. It is the revelation of oneness in a way. The revelation of oneness through the intuition. The difference is that between the light of a star and the light of a steadily waxing sun. One reveals the fact of night, and the other the world of daylight and of conscious being. But of course, the stars in most cases are far greater than the sun, but due to the relativity of our situation, the stars being so far away, they have to appear to be lesser lights than the sun, at least relatively speaking, although when you compare even our sun with Sirius, Sirius is, by some estimates, 33 times more luminous than our sun. So illumination is not just a bright new idea. I have an idea. Okay, it can be the seed, when developed, of illumination. Now, then the Tibetan goes on to the 7 directions of the law of repulse. And I think I want to just say a little bit about this, but not get into the stanzas, because there is 8 hours of work on the stanzas, which are already up on Makara. So the same fundamental energy drives in 7 directions and returns the individual to the bosom of the spiritual father. Now it could be, of course, what are the spiritual father? Not just the 7 rishis, that's very high. The 7 monadic types are the 7 spiritual fathers. So the law of repulse drives in the direction of the monad. It must be remembered that the law of repulse, which is the law of the destroying angels, destroying our misidentifications, works in 7 directions. 7 being the operative number, the septenate in all of our form life conforming to 7 classifications, whereas there are 9 classifications of consciousness. That's interesting when you consider the 7 and the 9 paths on the way of higher evolution, and the 7 types of form and the 9 types of initiation. That it produces effects upon 7 different types of beings and of men, and that by reason of its activity it draws the prodigal son back to the father's home. So it works in 7 directions. Law of repulse produces effects upon 7 different types of beings and of men, according to the soul nature, but perhaps even according to the monadic nature, as there are 7 types of monadic natures, 7 monadic types on the monadic plane, and that by reason of its activity it draws the prodigal son. Notice aspect of the law of love. It draws, which is the magnetic power. It draws the 7 types back to their spiritual roots. Magnetic power of love. The law of repulse is an aspect of the law of attraction, or the law of love. It draws the prodigal son back to the father's home, back to the monadic residence, so to speak, the father's home, the domicile, there are 7 fathers. Each one has one particular type of father. So, back to the father's home. It draws, and it also drives, I think. Draws and drives. It draws the prodigal son back to the father's home, and then I wouldn't be surprised if, representing the monad as it does, it drives him back to the father's home as well. It causes him to arise and go. So he rejects the lower dismal circumstances in which he finds himself and starts homeward towards the monad, towards the 7 fathers, towards the, earlier I said the 7 rishis, but in a way maybe, well, that's certainly a possibility that each type of monad has a prototype within the Great Bear. Certainly each planetary logos does, and the monads are, in a way, given forth from the different planetary logoi, especially the sacred ones. But we must remember that when Christ was relating this story, he made it abundantly clear that there was no impulse to return until the pilgrim in the far country had come to himself or to his senses as a result of satisfied desire through riotous living. Surely there must be something more. And he said, well, even the servants in my father's house have more than I have. So something in him awakens, and he begins to somehow remember this. Interesting that the idealism, the sense of smell which takes him home, is found on the 3rd subplane of the atmic plane, related to the 3rd ray as the Lord of Memory. He begins to remember something faintly from the earlier times. And this was followed by a consequent satiety and loss of contentment, and then by a period of intense suffering. So what are the steps? Riotous living. Well, let's see, how can we put this here? Call this step 1, and then we'll say satisfied desire is step 2. Consequent satiety, okay, step 3. Loss of contentment. He's not happy with his present circumstances. He's living on the husks of life and not on the kernels. Step 4, and a period of intense suffering. He no longer is the wandering one. It broke his will to wander. He feels he can find nothing in these lower worlds. Step 4, which broke his will to wander or to desire. At least desire the outer things. The outer things. A study of this story will be found revealing. In no scripture is the sequence of events as they deal with the pilgrim's existence and life in the far country. The pilgrim, who is the pilgrim? The pilgrim is the... Oh, I have to somehow find my... There we go. The pilgrim or the monad. The monad. His existence in the and life in the far country and his return so concisely or so beautifully treated. Seek out your Bibles and study this tale and read for yourself. The Pilgrim's Way, basically saying, read the way of the monad in extension. Monad in extension. How did I do that? Monad in extension. There it is. The way of the monad in extension on the pilgrimage in the lower 5 worlds. The effect of this law of repulse as it works out in the world of discipleship and destroys that which hinders sends the pilgrim hurrying back consciously along one of the 7 rays that lead to the center. Well, you know, it's pretty much concerning souls at first. Concerning souls at first. But later, the monadic ray, I suppose, one repulses even the vehicle of the soul. So this cannot be handled in detail here. Sends him hurrying back along, hurrying back. Notice the speed factor related to the will. Speed and will, hurrying back. This cannot be handled in detail here. Our present task is that of treading the path of probation, or of discipleship, and of learning discipline, dispassion, and the 2 other necessities upon the way, discrimination and decentralization. These are in order from the physical to the personal. It is possible, nevertheless, to indicate the goal and to point out the potency of the forces to which we shall be increasingly subjected as we pass, as some of us can so pass, onto the path of accepted discipleship. This is really what he hopes for the reader of this treatise. This treatise is written for initiates of the 1st degree, and following the 1st degree, somewhat following it anyway, one can become an accepted disciple. Mostly there are a number of lives between the 1st and 2nd degree. Only in one of the references does it seem to indicate that the 2nd degree can follow fast upon the 1st. I suppose everything is relative and everything depends upon the successful work of the disciple and the degree of sacrifice. To those who give all is given. One has to have great faith about that. It is possible, nevertheless, to indicate the goal, point out the potency, etc., of the forces to which we will be increasingly subjected as we pass on the path of accepted discipleship. And this we will do in the form of 7 stanzas, which will give a hint, if one is an aspirant, of the technique to which one will be exposed. If one has passed further on the way, this will give one a command. Let's just say the will is involved. The will and mind are involved for the disciple, which as the disciple with spiritual insight, one will obey because one is awakened. So a hint, obedience first. The hint, obedience of the disciple. The hint for the aspirant, obedience of the disciple, and knowledge for the initiate. If one is an initiate, they will evoke the comment, "This I know," because they will have passed through that. They will have repelled the lower circumstances, and they will have entered into that higher soul state which is decentralized from their lower involvements. They will be free. Free of the desire which keeps them attached to the lower worlds. Well, I spent 8 hours discussing the directions of Ray 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, we have the, well, I don't know what he's called. Is he called the gardener for Ray 1? We have Leaves of Moria's Garden, perhaps. He's certainly the director, but he directs and orders all things in the garden. For Ray 2, we have the scholar. Ray 3, we have the weaver. Ray 4, we have the mixer. These are important words describing the various soul types. Ray 5, well, the worker, you know, the worker whose toil is severe. The heat is great, the toil severe. Ray 6, the frenzied follower. The follower, anyway, he's in a frenzy in the beginning. And Ray 7, well, it's a long Ray 6 one. The magician. So these 7 words, we don't really get the word in the first Ray 1 stanza. We don't really get that, but let's just put them down, so we look at them. We'll call them the gardener, the scholar, the weaver, the mixer, worker, follower, magician. And right in these words, there are found in a way epitomes of how the different types actually do work. And I recommend you, to go to the Makara website, and to go to the Makara website and to maybe listen or view what I have discussed maybe more than a year ago on these points. Now, such are some thoughts translated from an ancient metrical arrangement. We have to be grateful for Master DK's Mercurian facility to translate the ancient languages and the ancient symbols. And I'm sure that he knows the Senzar, which is completely inaccessible to us. The ancient metrical arrangement which may throw some light upon the duality of personality and the work to be done by the beings found upon the septonate of rays. Some light upon the duality. Well, the personality tending below and the personality tending above, and the duality of soul and personality. Know we where we stand? Do we realize what we have to do? Well, those are the questions for all of us, and so many of us really don't know where we stand. And it takes a long time before we get a clear and dispassionate view of where we stand. As we strive to enter into light, let us count no price too great to pay for this revelation. As we strive to enter into light, let us count no price too great to pay for that revelation. I suppose he's attempting to inspire in us the incentive to live out the laws of the soul, no matter what may be the consequences to our personality. And over time, we begin to see that we are already being prompted in that direction, and we can do so consciously and with full application of all the powers we have accumulated in the personality, laying them at the disposal of the soul as it seeks to inspire us to become conscious soul. Now, I'll tell you what, I think there's no need for me to go on further, because now comes the interesting discussion of the sequence of laws, leading, which is a discussion in its own right, and then leads to the law of group progress, which itself is quite a full discussion, but with the last laws not so. Much shorter discussion. So the hour is late here, after 2, and I can't see any value in forging ahead at this point, because this program is almost 3 hours long. Forgive me, but I'm not going to divide it up, actually. It's a 3-hour program, but hopefully it will be under 1 gigabyte when you download it, and then you can just stop it when you want to. So this is the end of Laws of the Soul, webinar commentary number 20. I hope I'm correct here. And we're on page, I never know. Page 172. 172. Duration about 2 2 hours and 50 minutes. Not exactly a convenient broadcasting time, I do admit, but seems to be the right place to stop. And we will be beginning of Laws of the Soul webinar commentary, number 21, page 172. And maybe the next part before we get into Law of Repulse will take about 1 hour. Perhaps that will be about right. Well, this is certainly fascinating material. You know, it was always my intention to get into esoteric psychology first, always having the interest in the seven rays and how they worked out in people's lives, and esoteric psychology is the natural field of study for that because it includes esoteric astrology and the study of the chakras, the centers, and rayology. The rayology, astrology, study of the centers. And it was a book that I began teaching how long? Well, maybe only 25 years ago in terms of the actual systematic teaching of it. 25, 26 years ago, something like that. Of course, there had been a lot of work done before that. I had finished my Ray book between 1986 and 1988. Then, you know, thinking maybe I knew something, which I doubt now, I went out and taught that in the University of the Seven Rays. And then the work in, later work in a synthesis of the books for our PhD work in the University of Seven Rays, a higher course. But now coming back to this book, you know, it's just an amazing and wonderful book because it really tells in a very practical way, the way of the soul in the personality, through the personality, and according to your ray type. So it can be quite specific in terms of what you are to do and what needs you may have. The only difficulty is to really assess what we should be working with. Are we working on the path of purification? Well, I'm sure there are many little areas we all have to clean up. You could see that, you know, you could see that even in the lives of some of those who were working towards the fourth degree, areas which needed to be cleaned up. And or are you working with the techniques of integration? Well, perhaps before that can really occur, the law of repulse has to be operating. The laws of the soul, of course, extend all throughout our work, and we have to see with which laws of the soul we may be particularly working. Some of them begin in the beginning, but extend throughout the duration of our development. Law of sacrifice, law of magnetic impulses, we find our group law of service, we serve constantly. Law of repulse, at a certain point, certainly has to follow the first initiation, and maybe it's much more active around the time of the second initiation, where we are learning then to apply the will rather than simply desire. We do overcome desire in a certain measure at that initiation, the second, and the law of repulse really kicks in at the third, if you think about it. But then, of course, the technique of integration, to create one as an integrated personality in energetic response to the soul, this also works toward the third initiation and even beyond. The techniques of integration given by the Tibetan are not so much about simply integrating the personality, but making it a subsidiary energy unit which works in correspondence with the soul. The law of fusion is operative in a way, all the way from the first initiation to the fourth, but begins particularly to become intense as the higher forms of meditation are applied around the time of the third initiation. So we have the law of repulse kicking in at the third initiation, technique of integration leading to it, technique of fusion really reaching a kind of climax at the third initiation, but going on to the fourth. these are and then there's the technique of duality, about which he says very little, but one can imagine that it has to do with the building of the antikarana and connecting spirit and matter, and the antikaranic methods are given, and technique of duality is mentioned in esoteric psychology too, before he got to rays and the initiations, which gave us, maybe through the antikarana work, the technique of duality. So all of these different methods, following the laws of the soul all through this process, working with the integration process at first, and the fusion process, and the law of repulse, various laws of the soul coming in after the third degree. Some of these higher laws of the soul are triadal in nature, so the antikarana has to be in process of building, and that's after the second degree pretty much, and continuing on into identification within the triad after the third degree, leading to complete fusion, I would say, by the time we reach the fourth degree, although good 75% of that fusion has occurred at the third degree. And then, from the second degree onward, working with the technique of duality or the antikarana building, which is going to take us, it's going to take us to the fifth degree. Then one wonders about a new antikarana being spun, which is going to take us away from the planetary ring pass knot altogether and towards sacred planets and towards distant stars and their constellations. And and then so when DK says, well, do you know where you stand? Know we where we stand? Do we realize what we have to do? Well, we've been given enough information perhaps to realize where we stand and what we have to do, but it's up to everyone to make a keen inner assessment and try to understand if he really realizes. Just as DK said, look, define those four words: discipline, dispassion, discrimination, and decentralization. You'll find it very valuable. Well, we actually have to do these things. All right, well, I think we'll have a 3-hour program kind of out of this. Please pardon the length. So we'll end this section, which pretty well ends the law of repulse per se, with the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, lots of ground covered. There's more to go. There's summary of the laws up to this point and the law of group progress, and then two laws about which I said a little bit, but which are difficult to grasp. The law of expansive response and the law of the lower four, but we will do what we can to speak of them. They're not so relevant to our immediate life of discipleship, but beyond the third initiation they will become relevant. Okay, see you then. Take care. Study hard. Bye-bye.